All right, I'm not sleeping tonight, so let's talk about what has my mind spinning at 4:40 a.m. The book Guillotine by Delilah S. Dawson. Now, I'm not saying that this is the deepest or most insightful piece of work that I've ever read. I'm just saying it got me thinking and, well, also had me geeking out. Horror has a way of getting me thinking in ways that only deeply flawed but interesting stories in other genres do. Like, I'm currently obsessed with Lore Olympus, but that's a video for when I finish that really long script. But what has got me loving and keeping me up about Guillotine besides the obvious? First, let me get to the spoiler free part of this gushing because we will be getting into spoilers, but first let's give everyone on the same page and give some recommendations for anyone who liked Guillotine and might want other things to read or watch. Guillotine is a novella about Dev, a young woman trying to break into the fashion industry and finding it impossible to get even an entry level job without any money or connections. Because of this, she starts dating the son of one of her idols in the fashion industry. And while she finds him repulsive, she finds the trade off worth it. Especially when she's able to get an invite to his family's private island for the family get together over Easter. When she gets there, Dev is disturbed to find that she has to sign a non disclosure agreement and that all her electronics have been confiscated. Still, she has already decided what she has to do in order to pitch her worth to her idol and prove that she's someone who she should employ. It just turns out that this also happens to be the time when the servants have planned to get revenge for all the shit these rich people have put them through over the years. The book is bloody, gory, and the messages are in your face and obvious. This is one of those fun stories that itches that scratch in me that wants blood and gore, but also wants there to be a little something worth thinking about in how it plays out. It's a popcorn gore fest that gives you just that edge that makes it worth thinking about past its last page. Also, rich people getting killed off their private islands turns out to be a favorite horror mystery genre of mine. For anyone looking for anything worth exploring past The Menu and Ready or Not, I have a couple of other recommendations. The other book recommendation is the obvious, and then there were none. Not all of our murder victims are rich in this, but they are on an island and they all get personalized and well deserved deaths. Like Guillotine, this story is rather short, only 6 hours as an audiobook compared to Guillotine's 5 hours. The next recommendation I have is a visual novel, and if you've ever seen me ramble before, you know this one. It's Umineko, When They Cry. This story is about a bunch of rich family members all coming together on their private island for a yearly get together when the grandfather pays back his debt to the island witch, and the remaining members had to find out the answer to a strange epitaph before the debt is repaid and they are all dead. This VN took me 55 hours to complete and read the first time through, but it's also a straightforward read. No questions, just words, sprites, and music. Don't worry, you will get to see these rich pricks die in all sorts of fun and increasingly bizarre ways as magic and logic clash. My last recommendation is actually a season of a TV series. Warning, it's really stupid, but it's also just a lot of gory fun. Slasher Season 4. No, you don't have to watch the other seasons. Each season is its completely own self contained story, except for some Easter eggs. This season is about a family who all go to their private island after the patriarch of the family dies, and they have to compete in a series of games in order to determine who inherits all of it. While there is commentary in this season, mostly this is just a lot of gory fun, and you just go for the fun of it. And with those recommendations out of the way, let's give a list of all the things I'm going to spoil while writing my thoughts out. So, spoilers for the books, movies, and shows I'm about to mention. Of course, I'm going to spoil Guillotine by Delilah S. Dawson. Then I'm also going to talk about And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, Umineko When They Cry by Ryushiki07, Slasher Season 4, and I'll also be talking about and spoiling Crooked House by Agatha Christie, Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney, We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, Playground by Aaron Beauregard, Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Baziterecki, The Menu, and Knives Out. So let's get into spoilers, so I can try to dissect what has been on my mind and had it spinning hard enough to give me another migraine this week. This is one of those gory spectacles that, beyond the obvious rich people die horribly on an island storyline, also has me thinking about other splatterpunk books I read. A lot of times these days, I think of Playground by Aaron Beauregard, as it briefly made the rounds in bookish spaces for its content. In the videos I saw, they seemed to reflect what I thought about the book. If you wanted a book filled with gore, where the meat sacks were mostly children characters, or you wanted something that was subversive to be subversive, this book might be up your alley. But if you were looking for anything of actual substance, then you were better off looking elsewhere. When I read extreme horror, I'm looking for something closer to guillotine. Yes, the message of the book is in your face, nothing hidden or obscured, but it's still there. It's even deeper than the initial idea of eat the rich and class struggle. Our MC starts out wanting to get into the competitive world of design, to make things that everyone wants to wear but only the rich can afford. But by the end, she realizes that being part of that world would mean being around people like the pieces of garbage that in the end she was almost cheering to be murdered by the servants. And in Guillotine, there isn't just one servant who was rejected from the main branch of the family because she was born a girl instead of a boy, and now she wants revenge. No, all the servants are rejected children of the main branch, abused mentally, physically, and sexually, and none of them older than 40. Oh, and all the deaths aren't just reflections of how the main branch of the family abused them, but also a reflection of how the rich were dealt with during the French Revolution. It made me think of how all the patriarchs in these stories were like, and how all of them kind of got the easy out. And remember, my ramblings are going to have huge, major spoilers for all stories I mentioned, so back out while you can. Because in Guillotine, it kills its patriarch first, after having him put his feet on the expensive table and having the butler lick his poisoned shoes. The servant leading the killing kills him by slitting his throat instead of any of the prolonged torture that any of the other characters suffer. And he is just the first of the patriarchs getting off easy after they brought up and some, even started their own horrible family lines. In Umaneko, the story often has the patriarch of the story never appear in the repeating events, and his body is only found dead later on, most almost unrecognizable. This is because he's been dead from the beginning. The actions of the story are happening because of his actions, but he's technically not there when the murders go down. Well, his body's there, but his soul is not. Someone else has solved the epitaph and taken his name. But only a select few know this, but who knows and who doesn't, that is one of the big mysteries of the island. In Slasher Season 4, Flesh and Blood, the patriarch is dead from the beginning. That's why the whole thing is set up. Though instead of Umaneko's patriarch, who knows everything is deadly unless people get the epitaph, and he doesn't actually want them to do that. The patriarch in this game didn't necessarily want all his kids to die. There's just someone on the island who's killing off all the losers, and well, the family isn't great, so sometimes they just do it to themselves. Now, I do understand why the patriarchs are usually given such easy deaths. The thing is, the people who set up the system, who created and molded the world that produced the broken and depraved people that now hold all the money and power, they're gone. They are a part of history. And while they might have hated the people in power based on what we know about them now, and they might have even suffered in the past because of the rules that they created, for us left in the wake of their horrible actions, we don't get to do anything to them. They gone. We can symbolically kill them, we can tear their legacy apart, but the people themselves are long gone and buried. But still, it's nice when a patriarch gets what's coming to him in one way or another. In The Crooked House, a mystery, not a horror, yes, the patriarch is dead, and it's his death that starts the story. But it turns out he was killed by his own granddaughter, a little girl who exemplified everything he wanted, but because he asserted the same cruel control over her life as he had his children, and he took away her ballet lessons, she murdered him. Sure, all the rest of his horrible family is still alive, but the facts around the situation are fairly satisfying. Don't ask me what happens to the little girl. I'm still processing my thoughts about that. Then there's Knives Out, where once again, it's the patriarch's death that starts the investigation and his will that drives the family to truly show their true colors. It's at the end when we learned that the patriarch brought up a bunch of people he hated and had left all his money to his nurse. And it turns out that he even did her a disservice by not allowing her to try and save his life, as the labels had been switched and thus she didn't give him the wrong dose of medicine. I think that's one of the things that drove me crazy about Daisy Darker, because the grandmother just killing off her grandchildren and herself felt very hollow. Or no, she didn't kill off her grandchild. Her grandchild killed off the rest of the family, but she was the one who, like, set it all up so all her children would die and only her granddaughter would live. One story where the patriarch actually gets to suffer is the head chef in the menu. Of course, in this case, the patriarch isn't the richest man in the world. Instead, Slowick is technically more in the servant or service worker role. Yes, he runs everything, but he is still making and catering to the people who enter his establishment. He has money to throw around, but not so much that he can buy an island. Well, maybe he could, but his restaurant only stayed open because of shady investors that are now part of his last menu. Still, within his craft, he is certainly a master. Like Marie, he's a person so high in his craft that he has enormous power within his chosen field. But like quite a few patriarchs in the story, he's the one who made the money, who raised himself up. He started by making burgers, a time he now looks back on fondly, and a fact that our final girl exploits. In this movie, he suffers with those he's punishing. He's even punished during one of the events for punishing a cook under him after she rejected his advances. But these patriarchs, even when they're alive to suffer, have to be the ones in control of the field. They know that they are one of the people who fucked everything up, along with those he's serving his food with, but to the very end, he has control of every step of the process. Now we get to talk about one of my favorite parts, the gruesome deaths. To start with our inspiration for this rant, let's talk about Guillotine's death, that are not just meaningful in how the characters lived, but the French Revolution. Some deaths in Guillotine were easy to understand how they connected to the French Revolution. Marie wears the literal pearls of Marie Antoinette around her neck that Des uses to strangle her. And then Des also uses the stiletto to punch a hole in Marie's neck to finish the job. Grandmother of the family is quartered by her beloved horses. But then there are other deaths, like when the uncle tries to swim for the boat, only for the servants to dump blood and flesh into the water so that the uncle is torn apart by sharks. Like, what kind of murders does that symbolize? Guillotine is not the only story within this sort of subset of stories that loves their symbolic deaths. Lots of other ones love their symbolic death. In And Then There Were None, it has a child's rhyme that forecasts the death of every person on that island. Also, their deaths will also be tied into how they were a horrible person in life. So, both symbolic of the poem and of their cruelty and evil. Also, don't forget, the worse your sin was, the longer you were alive on that island, so you could experience pain and fear and just the worst. In Umaneko, the deaths, especially in the first few time loops, carefully follow the epitaph of the witch and happen in such a way as to create closed room mysteries or what seem like impossible murders. Actually, there is a ton of meaning and metaphor in Umaneko's death, and I could just prattle about it forever. From the choice of who and how the first sacrifices die, to how Beatrice explains the deaths using magic while Battler tries to figure out how it could have happened logically. Umaneko just has a lot going on, which nicely brings us to the killers in our stories. In Guillotine, it's the servants with Valerie leading them. Valerie is loud and imposing. She's like the conductor of a troupe, bringing the servants together in designated spots to pull off every torture and death. She's the one who calls forward the servants personally harmed by each member of the main branch of the family, and has them enact their symbolic murder. She's also the one who tells Dev that she has to die, and then finds a way to save her by having Dev kill Marie and kind of making her an accomplice to all that happened. Valerie turns into this kind of humanizing element of the servants, the character the reader and Dev can concentrate on and understand the servant's point of view through. In And Then There Were None, the killer is hidden, a mystery of someone who has to be one of the people on the island, and thus one of the people murdered, which turns out to be true. Wargrave set up a bunch of deaths he could pull off on guilty people because he was near death, and well, he enjoyed killing. That's why he was a judge. He was simply one of those moral killers who have like reasons for why they kill people. In Umineko, the concept of the killer is twisted. There's various loops in which different members of the family are the killers, and then there's the supposed to be the actual events of the story in which the actual killer is never actually revealed, but in which we know that Beatrice set off a bunch of bombs on the island, and the only one who survived was Eva. Or so we're meant to believe until the epilogue, in which Battler shows back up. Speaking of Eva, this leads us to our final girls. In Guillotine, this is where we get the real reflection back on how the menu and Guillotine are sort of mirror images of each other. Besides the two stories sharing the rich people are the worst and make everything horrible sort of trope within them, they also have final girls that were there but were never supposed to be there. In the menu, her inclusion is more of just an annoyance to the chef because he hadn't made a meal for her. In Guillotine, Dev isn't the person who they want to torture and kill. She's not part of the family. Of course, the servants can't just let her live because there's no way she wouldn't tell everyone on the mainland what happened on the island. That's why they have to get her involved in the murders at the end of the story so that she won't turn on them because she's already an accomplice. Also, in both these stories, it definitely doesn't follow that the final girl is virginal. One is a girl who's doing her job, and the other is a gal who's looking to get her dream job. And both are using sex as a way to do that. So the way they survive isn't by beating the killers. In Guillotine, she literally joins them. I'm gonna stretch the version of what you would call a final girl for talking about and then there were none, because the last person alive is our school teacher, but she does not live, which according to some rules doesn't matter, she can live and die. But it's more than that. Remember when I said if you're the last to die, it's because you're meant to suffer the most? Yeah, her sin was the worst of the lot, so she's the last little soldier boy who doesn't make it. In Umineko, we have two final girls, kinda. There's Eva, the only known survivor of those who went to the island that year. And I want to write an entire script on Eva and her portrayal and possibilities through the visual novel because she is anything from the killer on the island before Beatrice blew everybody up to simply someone who survived the killer and somehow knew to get to the boat before the bombs blew everything. Our true final girl is Angie, the girl who never went to the island but who suffers under Eva and her hatred and who desperately looks for answers into the past. She's innocent, unless you believe the weird theory that she killed everyone somehow. I think that was a joke. Ooh, and we get to talk about Slasher, Flesh and Bone, where Liv joins in because she's the illegitimate child of the grandfather. And after everyone is dead, the last one by her hand because he was a jerk, she's left with the inheritance and all the weight it brings. All these final girls break and mold themselves to the trope of final girl in their own ways. Angie has to remain in ignorance not only to survive her story, but to also get the true ending. We have some final girls that get wealth and all that baggage that comes with it. We have final girls who learn to forget about riches and money and find something of value to do. Our final girls aren't innocent and weak and have to step up. Some of them meet some of those criteria, and other ones break them in very interesting ways. And in the end, I can't help but think of the twists in all these stories and how I hated the ending of We Were Liars. I get that this book is a YA book, but I did not want to be the twist that only half of them were dead because the MC was hallucinating them the whole time. I wanted them, including the MC, maybe especially the MC. But I have to remember that my satisfying ending is a lot of other people's biggest disappointment, because I love the ending of Umineko, and I know for a fact that a lot of people hated it. Mostly because, while it is messy, the ending of Umineko fits perfectly with the tone and buildup of the story. Yes, it doesn't give a definite explanation for what happened on the island, leaving it open-ended for people to speculate about, but the VN specifically has been about allowing for that magic. which is not a sentiment I share, but I appreciate the way it was told. The trouble is, the VN does market itself as a mystery story, with the MC fighting against a witch to prove that everything is true. And while he changes his mind, most of the people reading it did not and found the fact that it told you not to care about what was happening to be insulting. It did feel a little bit like the game was insulting you for wanting to know the answers, which is not a feeling you want to have when you do read a book like this or a VN like this. But once again, I appreciate how it was told, even if it didn't resonate with basically anyone else. I do think one of the most satisfying endings for me was actually the ending of season 4 of Slasher. Not just that she killed the guy who would share the inheritance with her by marrying her, and then, she gets the inheritance instead, but it also shows the corruption sinking into her by the ghosts and that now haunt her in the place that she's inherited. This is also why I completely support Dev, not knowing who her father was and finding some smaller way to work and do what she loves. I think this has always been my problem when I want a job because I never want a job that just makes money. I want to do something that matters. Even as a teacher, I found myself wanting to help people, but the bureaucracy in the system was very stifling and not actually supportive of the children. So now I'm a librarian or assistant librarian and share my love of information and books and a place where lots of people want to just have information and they don't have to spend any money. Anyways, my thoughts are now winding down. Maybe I can actually sleep now. So, now that all my thoughts are out, what for you makes a satisfying rich people die on an island story? What are your thoughts? What type of gory stories are you drawn to? Do you like the uneasier story that is subversive just to be subversive? Do you like it to be shocking as possible? Do you like your gore to have a little commentary to it? Do you like it to be in your face, something that is more implied than shown? What is your preferred medium to experience your gore? Book, video game, movie? Let me know.